Hi guys, Gary Jarcy here, back with another video. Today's video is about the Drift Art 2. This is sort of an unboxing and a review, and then I might do a build video separately. I have already filmed it, it's just editing it all together takes a bit of time. So the kit itself is pretty comprehensive. You get everything. Sorry about that guys, just get the positioning better. The kit itself is pretty comprehensive. You get all the tools you need pretty much in here. Allen keys. This screwdriver is particularly good. Tweezers, sanding sticks, sanding paper, various spring settings, different size springs for different settings, lots of spare ball ends, and the bearings are pretty cool actually. I'll have to show you one of them in the actual car. They're like flanged bearings, which gives a lot more stability to the wheels. There's lots of carbon fiber pieces, and these are basically the layered upon layered to get the chassis built together. It's kind of a very unique design, but very clever. Complicated but clever, very good. Okay, the gearbox, I've got the spring edition which I've already built, and that's the got alloy gearbox parts. I think that's what separates it mainly, and a few other parts. And here you've got all the pulleys. Very clever servo horn, which is actually this big thing here, which is also your steering mechanism. Eliminates a lot of the complexity of having a rail. Very clever, very good. And also you've got all your metal parts. The rear drive shafts, I don't know if you can see that in the bag here, are kind of very different. They are not like your normal drive shafts. They link all the way through and more robust. So that's kind of cool. Lots of these metal pillars which form part of the chassis, and lots of screws and belts. Okay, so there's plenty in the box there to be going on with, and let's get to the actual car. So here is one I've built already. The car itself doesn't come with Speedo ESC motor, servo, or any of the radio gear. So I'm running a let's see if I can show this on the side, A11 CLS servo. These are quite popular now. I was introduced to these, I think, with the GLA I got off eBay a year or so ago. Very good. I'm using an MB4 receiver there, version 3 gyro with adjustable endpoints, and a censored geo racing setup. So that's 6800 kV motor, and the censored brushless speed controller from Geo Racing. So what do I think to the car? Well, let's start off with the build. I'll talk about the build briefly here, but I will do a more extended video on it. The chassis itself is made up of layers. I don't know if you can see this, but there's like almost 3 layers of the chassis plates that go on top of each other, and the pins that hold the suspension arms in place, so the wishbones, are actually trapped between the layers, and that's how you get the rigidity. So there's no mounts, so to speak. They're actually mounted in the chassis. As you can see, it looks pretty complicated. I've glued this on upside down, by the way. I will pick it. It's not glued, it's just taped. I can take that off and replace it. It's a belt drive system, which I was a little bit dubious of, but I have to say works pretty well in this car. One of the unique features of this belt drive system is you can adjust the gearing on the fly just by moving the belt position. You can change the gearing from low to high. I think there's about 4 different options there. You can have it there and there, there and there, and then combined the number of combinations that gives you. The rear axle is fixed, so it's not got a diff, it's got a fixed rear axle. There's a really good caster adjustment on this car, which I love and hate for 2 different reasons. This enables full adjustment of the caster depending on how far you shorten or lengthen these rods. Toe in, toe out at the front. What I really like about this car is how you can adjust the suspension. The shocks are not oil filled, but you can't grease them either really. You have to they're springs, but they're very smooth out the box. Very smooth. Didn't have to do any freeing up of the suspension at all. The height adjustment on these is very clever. So you can adjust the tension from these collars down here, which is the opposite of your normal shocks. So you can twist that around to shorten the compressor spring more to make it firmer. There are stiffer springs and softer springs that come with the set, which is very good. But this screw here, if you turn that, that's how you adjust your ride height. And you can actually, it's very easy to do, and you can see there the ride height changing as I'm playing around with it. Very impressed with that setup, makes it very easy to adjust. Did I enjoy the build of this car? Yes, I did, because it was so different, but the instructions were not very good. They were not very clear, and it certainly it was frustrating at a few times trying to find the right screws for the right parts. But I'm impressed with the actual quality of the plastics. They didn't look that good to me in the pictures, but I think they're a nylon, they're very strong. So overall, the car is good quality. I do like the quality of the car. As you can see here, I've got it set up with a counterbalance, and I've got it set to 98mm at the moment. I did run this at 90mm, and I can report the handling was very good. I'll try and get into as many details as I can, because I'm going to get lots of questions about this car. I'm using a 6,800 kV motor. One of the reasons I'm using that is because I found the 3,500 too slow. If you're a beginner, this car can run so slowly out of the box with a 3,500 kV motor. It makes learning how to drift very easy. But like all of these type of cars, the setup is everything. And this is tricky to set up. The steering, I'll give it that, it's very straightforward. Once you've got the rods in the right place, that's fine. It's easy to adjust the suspension height and the tension of the springs, but these parts here are very small. They're of good quality, but they're very small. And if you're taking them on and off, you can still damage them. So they do give you spares in the box, which I commend them for. But I found it quite fiddly to adjust. But that said, it did drift pretty well, pretty easily compared to other cars I've used. So in terms of its actual handling, very slow, very smooth. Now, one of the things that does set this car apart, which is an idea I'm going to pinch my other cars, if I show you by taking off the wheel, there's a couple of things that I've learnt with my other drift cars, which this set has out of the box, which is very clever. So first of all, there's hardly any wheel wobble on this car, especially at the rear. And it's because it uses flanged bearings. I don't know if you can see that there. The bearing actually juts out from the plastic and lips over, and it does that on both sides with both bearings, and what that gives is extra stability to the shaft that's going through it, so it doesn't wobble as easily. And you can see there's barely any wobble in that. The other thing they've done, which is very clever to help eliminate that, is simply the nuts themselves have got flanges on them, and they're quite big flanges. Now, I achieve this usually by using washers, and that gives additional stability to the wheels. But this out of the box straight away, pretty effective. Now, let's get that tightened back up. So there's lots to like about this car. In terms of the steering angle, it's a bit trickier to get the parallel turn all the way, and I think that's as far as I can get it with the leading wheel in both directions. So it hasn't quite got the steering angle of the XRX, but it's very easy to set up and it's very stable. I mean, this setup here, having the camber arm here, caster arm, really increases the stability of the front arms. Even though they look quite flimsy, this is very stable. So you get less gyro shake through vibration of parts. Doesn't mean you don't get it if you're not careful, but you will get less. Okay, let's move on to the bodies I use with this car. And this is where the fun started. So this is fully adjustable, 90 to 120, I think even 130mm. I'll double check that and put it in the description. This is where the problem starts. This car is fully adjustable in every way you can imagine. Even the body mount here, where you can actually mount the shells, has 2 steps to it. I don't know if you can see that. So you can sit the shell higher or lower, which is useful to have with this belt being here. I'll explain in a minute. Also, you can slide this backwards and forwards, so you can adjust where the front wheel arches are going to sit if you've adjusted the caster angle and brought the wheels back slightly. The chassis itself, when you adjust it, you can slide it exactly where you want, just like with the XRX DPA Sport, which is very good as well. It makes it very easy to get the wheels in the right position. So the adjustability is on point, brilliant. Where the problem started for me isn't so much in the setup or the handling of the car, it's when I went to fit a Mini Z body. Now you may notice I've got a custom mount on here, and I'll show you why in a moment. It's to do with these arms here and the way the front suspension works. Because the suspension arms have to move up for the wheels to move, can you see that? And also because of this arm here, you're going to have issues with Mini Z shells hitting underside the bonnets. Now certain shells are better than others, but the ones I thought would be okay, like my Audi R8, they were a problem. So fortunately the car itself does have a solution for this on the whole by using these higher mounts. The other issue I had was with the shell that I used, this car has actually been set up for, which is the white NSX you saw in the start. If I put the shell onto the lower setting, it rubs the wheel, it rubs the wheel here. So you have to bear that in mind with the shell you're going to select. You can move the motor down, it's fully adjustable, so I can drop this motor down to a lower level. And I'll show you that in a moment. So this can swing up or down, so I can drop the motor. The motor wasn't the issue, it's the wheel here hitting on the back. Sorry guys, I'm not being very good with the camera today. Let me just readjust the camera position. That's better. So yes, with the rear spur wheel there for the belt rubbing against the chassis, so I have the shell, so I had to mount the shell on the higher one. And also that helped with the front, but didn't completely solve it for this NSX shell, so I had to 3D print a custom mount to lift the nose higher and then adjust all the settings on the suspension so I could actually drop the car down so it didn't look like it was riding in the sky. I managed to do it, but it was a bit tricky. So I'll just mount this car in now. Well, I've just adjusted the ride height on that one wheel. I'll have to change that. So I'm just going to show you here. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. So I was able to get the wheel arches to match up with the wheels with a lot of adjusting. So now that fits quite nicely. Now, otherwise, the adjustability on this is amazing. Really appreciate the fact that I could move things around so much. And it was easy to get the wheel width right. Now I'm using an offset 3 on the front and an offset 1 on the rear, and that works perfectly. Criticism with this car is probably the opposite of the XRX DPA Sport. The XRX is very wide out the box, and you have to tweak it to be able to go narrow to fit the narrower shells. And there are some shells that will definitely be out of bounds. I don't think I'll ever get my Nissan Silvia on the DPA Sport, but the Skyline will fit with a few tweaking of the arms, and I'll demonstrate that. I've been asked to show how I've done that. And in this car it's the opposite. Out of the box you can't get it wide enough with the setup that it comes with, not because of the arms here, but because of the arms that control the steering. You can't unscrew them enough. So the way I got around that, and it's not an issue really, I use offset 3 at the front, and that's given me the width for this car. But you can buy an optional set which will give you the extra width on those arms. So if you're going to use a 1/24 scale, they do provide optional rear arms as well, and rear drive shafts and wheels to make everything wider. So the options are there, and certainly you get a lot for your money out of the box with this car, in that there's so many adjustable things with it. If you've got your own radio gear, it's a good choice. Now it looks like that wheel's very high there, but once I actually set the car down, it actually seats into that perfectly. I'll show you that when it's doing its test drive later. So in terms of adjustability, I think the issues you're going to have with the Mini Z bodies, you can see I've got suspension movement there just fine. Unless you've got a 3D printer for the mounts, you're going to find a lot of the shells are going to struggle. Now I might be wrong here, but I've tried a few of my favourite shells that are usually pretty forgiving at the front, and I've had issue. That said, if you're using magnetic mounts, I think you're going to be fine. It's going to be no issue at all. And if you're using a 1/24 scale body, Again, if you're using magnetic mount to that, you're going to be fine. If anything, this car's got so much adjustability, it makes it very easy to use those bodies. So in terms of driving, I found this very maneuverable and very easy to use once I got the setup right. I think what really helps here with this car is you can get the steering centered very easily because it's very visual. You can see where it's supposed to be just by positioning the sorry guys, I'm off camera again. Just by positioning the servo head in the middle, you can see that the arms need to be the same length either side, and then everything has to work around that. So there's no point if you set it up and then trim it back to center and you lose some throw. Ultimately, you can get this as centered and as level, and it's very easy to see. And once you've done that, everything else is fine tuning. The suspension moves very freely, and certainly have no criticism of that. The car itself is very light. Now, I mean, I'm going to weigh this now fully loaded. Here we go. So with the battery, 142 grams. Now, and that's with a 10 gram weight on the front. It's a very, very light chassis, very light. In comparison, if I get my XRS DPO Sport, okay, I'm just going to pop the light fitting off here. Okay, that's 160 grams. So that's fully loaded as well. Obviously without the 10 gram weight. It's 140, so 20 grams difference, and this has actually got a weight. So it's a far, far lighter car. Okay guys, so enough of me talking now. Let's show you some footage of it drifting, and let's see what we think. So guys, I've taken quite a few different angles here, different shots, just to give you a feel for how the car handles. And straight away, it's very light on its feet. The 30 gram weight difference does make a difference. Very maneuverable and easy to change directions. Probably the easiest to change directions of all the cars I've tried. The car itself, the throttle does feel a bit woolly. I think this is because it's a belt drive. Now, that's not taking anything away from it, but my BZ3 doesn't feel that way. I think this is to do with belt tensions and the setup of the car. But it's a case of now I use a 6,800 kV motor to get the extra oomph that I wanted, but I still feel more direct connection when I'm using, say, a geared car like the XRX or GLD. But that's not a criticism, it's just a different style of driving. So I've done a few different angles here just to see how the car moves, and you can see it's very well poised, and you can see the suspension working. I think in some of these shots you'll see as the car rolls to the side, you can just see the suspension working. Not in this particular shot, it's quite flat there, but when I've got it outside you'll see some better angles there. Now in a second I think we're going to do a snake shot from the side. Here we go. Look at the angle of the wheels there. It's more than enough. You know, you're getting sideways action, and the car is, you know, not struggling to come out of it smoothly. So with the endpoint adjustable gyro, I think you need that for definite. But the car itself, this is a good one actually. Just here now, you can see I'm going one direction, and then it just switches to go around the other corner in a figure of eight so smoothly without any real effort. I don't even think I had to hit the brakes to try and switch. Okay, these outside shots, you can see more of the car's suspension. You can actually see the back wheel wobbling there. It's not wobbling, it's bouncing up and down. And that's because I forgot to correct the ride height after I was demonstrating to you guys earlier how you can adjust the rear suspension. So, yeah, even then it was pretty poised, and I did correct it later on. With the car itself being sort of belt drive, you've got to be careful with the motor settings. If you set the motor too far back against the belt, you think the belt's nice and tight and it's rubber, it's not going to bother the motor, it will overheat. Here you can see I can instantly just stop mid-drift and actually dodge that little plastic centerpiece, the glass table there. Just shows the maneuverability of this car. I'm not sure about high speed work with this car yet, but I'll review that later on when I've got the drift track out. But for slow speed and maneuvering around small areas like this, it's absolutely amazing. Very light on his feet, very poised. So guys, that's all for this time. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Probably have the build video for this car coming out soon.
In the meantime, keep drifting, and I'll see you guys all next time.